sure many of you are familiar with horror movies that were inspired by real events, such as the ones inspired by real-life killers like Psycho, and ones based on real mysterious events like Nightmare on Elm Street. But did you know that real-life events can be inspired by horror films? There are lots of cases in which horror movie fans took things a step too far with their obsessions. Here is 5 cases in which horror movies inspired actual murders. Child's Play. On February 1993, a 10-year-old boy named James Bulger was with his mother at the New Strand shopping centre in Liverpool, England. At one point, while the mother was distracted, 2 boys by the names of Robert Thompson and John Venables started leading him away. They took him to several locations and fought with him, as well as joked about throwing him into a canal. The 2 disturbed children then took Bulger out to a railway line, where they tortured and killed him. The 2 boys became the youngest murderers in English history, at only age 10. They were put on trial where they were found guilty, and they were placed into custody until they turned 18, under new identities. It is unclear what motivated them to kill James Bulger, but a lot of people believed it was inspired by the film Child's Play 3, which caused the movie to be under controversy. Not only did it come out just a couple years prior, but a short time before the murder, it was discovered that one of the boys' fathers had rented that very movie for him and his son to watch. Not only that, but the 2 young killers were found to have possessed stolen items, including blue paint, which they used to torture and humiliate Bulger, batteries which they forced down Bulger's throat, and a troll doll. Child's Play 3 conspirators believe this to be influenced by a scene in Child's Play 3, where Chucky was smeared by blue paint from a paintball. Other than that, no one truly knows if this movie had anything to do with the killing, but it is something people still speculate today. Scream. On January 13th, 1998, the body of Gina Castillo was found in her house, fatally stabbed to death. It was discovered that the murder had been committed by her own teenage son, Mario Salvador Padilla, along with his cousin Samuel Ramirez. It turns out that they had watched 2 horror movies that they attempted to reenact murders from, Scream and Scream 2. After viewing both these films, they planned to buy Grim Reaper costumes and electronic voice boxes in order to imitate the Ghostface killer. During the time of the murder, however, the 2 boys couldn't afford the costumes, so they improvised by pulling their shirts over their heads when committing the gruesome act. Later, Mario claimed that he was angry at his mom for grounding him, which caused his unstable mind and unhealthy obsession with murder to be directed at her. The police decided to leave mentions of the films they watched out of court, not believing that the films meant to insinuate actual real-life crimes. Mario was then sentenced to life in prison without parole for first-degree murder, as well as conspiracy to commit other acts of murder. His cousin Samuel, however, was only sentenced to 25 years, which means in a few years, he will be a free man. American Psycho. In 2004, in southern Florida, young Michael Hernandez was only 14 years old when he brutally murdered Jamie Go in a middle school bathroom by slitting his throat. When interviewed, Hernandez claimed that he was inspired by the movie American Psycho and looked up to the killer in the film. He claimed that he was on a path to becoming a serial killer himself, and used the murders and behavior depicted in the movie to assist him in doing so. He was on trial for approximately 4 years, and then was sentenced to life in prison. Saw. This one happened back in 2007, and the saddest part about this was, despite it being incredibly foolish of the 2 offenders, this death was indeed an accident, not intentional. But while it may not be 100% murder, it does involve someone being responsible for a loss of life thanks to inspiration from a horror movie. 2 teenage girls from Winchester, Tennessee decided that it would be hilarious to prank call someone with a message inspired by the Jigsaw killer from the Saw franchise. The woman they ended up calling was a 52-year-old woman by the name of Beverly Dixon. She was at home going about her evening when she received a message from the girls telling her that someone was trapped in her house with a key and toxic gas was about to fill her home, followed by a quote from the movie, "Live or die, make your choice." Her husband stated that she was absolutely terrified after hearing this message. Unfortunately, the following day, the stress became too much for her and she suffered a stroke. She was brought to the hospital where she later died. Now, the two girls responsible for her death were only 13, and they did not know that their little joke would cause someone's death, but they were still found guilty in juvenile court for phone harassment, and were each charged with $2,000 for their crimes. All we can do is hope that they learned their lesson. And finally, Nightmare on Elm Street. In September 2004 in London, England, a man named Daniel Gonzalez went on a murder spree all across the country. He took the lives of 4 people and injured 2 others in just the span of 3 days. 2 of his murder victims included an elderly couple whose home he broke into. During the spree, he was armed with several knives, which were later discovered to be inspired by the character of Freddy Krueger. When he was caught by police, it was a very disturbing scene. He was naked, covered with blood, and attempting to bite into himself in order to find an artery so he could end his own life. The police had to actually wear protective gear just to arrest him because of his aggression. It was discovered that Gonzalez was a schizophrenic and was not under proper medication. He was also under the influence of drugs. The police later found a journal that belonged to Gonzalez, where he revisited some of his killings. He wrote that the experiences were some of the best he has ever had in his life, and also compared himself to Freddy Krueger himself. He was of course put on trial and sent to jail, under not 1 but 6 life sentences. However, he did not have to face too many years in jail, for in 2007, he slit his own wrists while in his cell. Probably one of the most disturbing murderers to be inspired by a horror film. Thank you guys for watching this. I'd just like to say that I do not mean to offend anyone in this video. I just found these from online articles and they interested me. These are indeed very shocking, and I thought I would include them in a video, not just for the shock value, but to also inform you all of the real-life dangers that can happen out there. And people should always make sure that their interests in horror and slasher flicks do not encourage them in any way. If anything, this is what makes these kinds of movies truly frightening. The fact that in this world, they can in fact happen. And hopefully in the future, they will happen less and less. Hope you enjoyed this list, and have a good night.